Hi guys, welcome back to this advanced AutoCAD course, and I want to get into some of the layout tools now. This again can not just speed up your work but make you need less drawings, make your drawings look more professional, and this is an area where a lot of people are lacking. I get drawings from people who have used AutoCAD for a long time and they're not very well done in terms of the layout and the sheet tools and things like that, the viewports. People do seem to have a lack of understanding of how these work and how best to use them. So this is quite a big subject. I'll cover a few chapters working through the different ways of presenting your drawing and making it easier to use. Okay, so to start off, I'm going to use this basic drawing, which will look familiar to anyone who's done the basic course, because this is what you create when you do the basic course. And it's a typical drawing you might get if you were in construction or architecture, that kind of thing, but the same principles apply to any discipline. Okay, so this can be found in the resources section of the course, and this is how it will open up. Now what we've got here, we're in layout, one layout tab. We have our title block here, which is A4 if I remember rightly. Yeah, A4. Fairly rare in most disciplines to use A4 title blocks, but for the purpose of this course I wanted something you could print on a normal home printer. Not a lot of people have A3 or A1, certainly A1 printers, so I did keep this as A4 for the purposes of a tutorial. But we have one title block, which is a block, and we have a viewport. If you double click, you're in the viewport. There we go. We have our model in model space. We have our dimensions and text in paper space. Right. And this, like I said, is a basic drawing. Now we're going to make this a bit more advanced, and we're going to set this up as a drawing document more than just a drawing. We're going to end up with a few tabs with different drawings and different views, different scales, all that kind of thing. So let's have our main plan here, and so supposing this was our main layout. Okay, this is our drawing number one, main layout of the room. Okay, but what we want to get a bit more detailed. We want to do a drawing of each room. We want to add in some extra items. Maybe we'll have an electrical layout for each room, an architectural layout. You may have other things. You may have a desk layout, furniture layout, that kind of thing. Okay, but this is our main drawing number one, the room layout. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click this, I'm going to type in rename, and we can rename our layout tab. We'll just call it main layout. Okay, now if we right click it again, go to move or copy, and what we want to do is create a copy of that, save as having to set it all up again, create a copy, move to the end. Now what we have is a duplicate. Let's rename this room 01. Okay, so we have a main layout and then exactly the same title block and everything, room 01. Now what this is going to be, as you've probably guessed, is a zoomed in drawing of room 01. We can put more detail in. Here you don't want to put too much detail in, it's a bit too zoomed out, things will get a bit cluttered. So we're gonna have a zoomed in drawing for each room. Okay, so now we've created this, what we'll do, we'll double click in our viewport to take us into this tiled model space, and if we were to pan now, and remember pan, you hold down your middle mouse wheel. If we were to pan, because we have our text in paper space and dimension, that can happen, and that's not good. because if you didn't notice, you may be, let's see, say we were zoomed in here, so we didn't have our title block, and we went into tiled model space, and we started panning around and zoom in and all sorts of things, and then we went back to paper space. We think, oops, what's going on here? Okay, now let me undo that. A way to stop that, when you go into your viewport, your tiled model space, if we go back to our main layout, this is fixed, this view is fixed, okay? So we don't want that to be able to move. So we click this padlock here, we lock that view. Now if you were to pan, even in tiled model space, it's locked. You cannot change that. Once you have your view set, it's a good idea to lock it, and that way nobody can change it, because if this is to scale and then someone ever so slightly change it, it can lead to all sorts of problems. So always lock your viewports. Okay, now room 1, go back here. Okay, so we're going to set up our room drawings now. We're going to have an individual drawing for a room. Okay, so I'm just going to grab all this text. This is something I like to do, and just move it out of the way, move it out to the side there, and then we can just pull in bits of text and reuse it. That way we always have the same dimension style, text style. There's nothing worse than opening somebody's drawing and they've got 3 different dimension styles, lots of different text styles, it's all different fonts and sizes. It just looks so it just looks amateurish basically. It doesn't look professional. You want the same kind of follow through with the same sizes and styles. Usually in Britain we would use something like 3.5 height for a title and 2.5 for dimension. So you can have different sizes for different types of text like titles and things, but you want the same font and you want to follow through with, if all the titles are the same size, all the dimensions the same size, and all the text the same size. Okay, it just looks more professional. So we need to figure out what scale we want these room drawings. Now the main plan is 1 to 100, so we want to zoom in more than that. You're usually limited by, in AutoCAD you could have any scale you want. You could have 1 to 52.5 or something like that, but you're usually limited to the kind of drawing standards depending on where you are on Earth. I'm in Britain, we have British standard scale sizes. If you look down here you can set your scale. We wouldn't usually use these, certainly not in construction. Usually you'd go 1 to 20. You might have a 1 to 25 and then you jump straight to 1 to 50. For the purposes of a tutorial or practicing you can use any scale you want, but I just can't bring myself to use 1 to 30 really. So okay, what I'm going to do, I'm going to set 1 to 50. And we want all our rooms to be the same scale. We don't want different scales for each drawing, so use the biggest one to set your scale. Yeah, that fits in nicely. We have room around the outside of it for some text. We wouldn't want it something like that, it's too big. Okay, so give yourself plenty of room for text. You don't want a drawing looking too cluttered. That looks okay to me, so we'll use that. We'll start off with this room 1 and we'll double click outside. So now we've got our room 1 in the center. We also have this, we don't need this, we don't need anything outside of room 1 really. So what I like to do is change the viewport. Okay, so if you remember this window we're looking through to here, this is called a viewport and we drew that in. So one thing happens a lot in CAD, you have lines on top of lines. We have our viewport is actually on top of this title block, but when we go to click it, because the title block is sitting if you imagine it in 3D, if the title block is sitting on top of a viewport, it's selecting the title block. Okay, so how do we select our viewport? Well, there's a few different ways. We could just draw a rectangle around that. Because we did a window rectangle, we only fully selected the viewport, we didn't select the full block of the title block. If we'd have done that, we would have selected the title block, but here we only select the viewport. So you can do it that way. Another way, if you find this happening, you think, well, I want my viewport to be on top of my title block, not the other way around. If you right click, we can set this draw order. Okay, so by selecting our title block, right click, draw order, center back, that has now sent the title block behind everything else. So when we click here now, the viewport is sitting on top and we can click it. Okay, draw order, you'd end up doing this a lot. AutoCAD tends to fiddle around and move things on top of each other. Really, you don't want to draw things on top of other things if you can help it, but you have to sometimes. If you draw, say, a boundary, hatching, you might do it. Again, you might do it with a viewport, like we do here. You probably would do it with a viewport. So draw order is something you need to know. And again, it's just right click. You can bring to front, you can center back, or you could bring it above objects. So if we had multiple objects on top of each other, and you could just say, well, okay, title block, bring it above that object, and now your title block will be on top again. Okay, so let's select that, send it to the back. Now we can select our viewport, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab these grips and I'm going to move it up to about there. I'm going to grab this one and move it in, and a viewport remains rectangular. It's not like a square where if I'd have grabbed this it would have just brought that corner. It keeps it square, so it will move that whole side in, and I'm just going to do that. So what I've done, I've used this viewport now because I've made the viewport smaller, it's only showing us this room, and that leaves us everything around here free for text. Okay, but I don't actually want to show the viewport. If I printed this now, I would have this square on. I don't actually want that. So what you want to do when you're using viewports, if you go to layers, I'm going to create a new layer, call it Vport for viewport, and I'm going to make it invisible. Okay, so now if we select our viewport and we put it onto this layer, you'll get this message: one or more objects has been moved to a frozen layer. That's a warning to tell you that you've turned your object off. In this case, it's exactly what we wanted to do. Close. So there we have it. Now we just have our room. Bear in mind, we've not changed the underlying model whatsoever. We've not cut this off at all, we've not deleted anything. All we've done is change how it's going to be viewed. The benefit of doing it this way is if we wanted to add something into this room, just put a circle in there, it is on all our layouts. We don't have to redraw anything. Anything we add is there, and it's all done through viewport control. Believe it or not, you would see, and you will see, people who, if they wanted a room view, they would have gone, well, okay, I'm going to select this and I'm going to draw a rectangle, and I'll just trim out everything outside of that rectangle. Like that. Now, believe it or not, this is how some people use CAD. delete that. Believe it or not, that is how some people use CAD. They do something like that. And for each room they would have something up here, and when they did another viewport, instead of doing this, they would have just scrolled up to there, and they would have each room cut down, and then if they did add something like that circle, they would have had to add it to everything. It's a nightmare. Any changes have to be duplicated more than once. Things get missed. This is why you see drawings where things don't match up, and it's just a terrible way of working. It makes everything, not only do things take twice as long, but the file sizes are much bigger. It's just not very good. So by doing it this way, it just makes things much more efficient. Okay, so over the next few lessons we're going to add some detail in here. We're going to use a lot of layer control and viewport control so that we can keep having the same model but having different views. And this is a really important part of AutoCAD. So join me in the next lesson and we'll start adding some detail into this room.